I'll start. I would disagree that any of those things are small things. Local government, school boards are absolutely critical to the fabric of the republic, and we don't need to see those diminished and the voting rights of our citizenry diminished at that level or any other level. So I would push back on anything about local elections, local government, school boards are small. I think they're vitally important.
You also find that it is at the local level where it's most directly applied and impacts families. So in the school board, that impacts your children. If you want to see families get riled up, start messing with their children. And that's an issue all across the United States. So school board elections are vital. And what we saw in the rollout of COVID, a lot of the draconian things that were put into place that were quite frankly a violation of the First Amendment, telling people they couldn't go to church, telling people they couldn't talk to each other, making them separate, all these types of social controls were implemented at the local level, where you started feeling government really going after and abridging your constitutional rights happened at that local level. So what we have to do for sure is make sure that anyone who is voting understands the First Amendment is part of the training. Quite frankly, my wife went through the citizenship training. The news media got wind that she was becoming a U.S. citizen, got the citizenship test, took it to my House colleagues, and many of them didn't pass. And at the end of the day, if you are here, you need to go through that training, understand the Constitution protects you from the majority who might want to take away your rights simply because they have more votes than you. So understanding fundamentally your constitutional rights protects you has to be applied at every single level of government, school boards, local elections, at every level.
Well, and I would say to that point, I mean, that D.C. City Councilman person basically said the quiet part out loud. Anybody that questions why we're here, I mean, I think he said the quiet part out loud, right? I mean, this notion that a school board or a local council doesn't matter, I mean, we've already heard it from the senator here. In our state, every school board has millage authority. They can raise your taxes. And so why would anybody support the notion that somebody who's not a citizen of the country can go vote to raise taxes on people who are citizens of the country? I mean, that's back to that family argument we heard earlier. You might invite your neighbor over for dinner, that's being neighborly, but you're not going to let your neighbor decide what your family budget is or how much money you're going to spend on the dinner. And to me, this idea that this doesn't matter, that's pretty crazy. I mean, and I think that underscores the whole point of every state up here having this amendment on the ballot. If you go to France right now and you buy a flat in Paris, you don't get to vote. I have a friend that has a place in the Bahamas. He didn't get to vote. He pays taxes, but he didn't vote. My wife still has property back in Ukraine. I'm not sure that property value is holding real great right now, but still got to pay taxes. We don't get to vote. I mean, no country in the world allows you to, as a non-citizen, go vote on tax increases or vote on local budgets if you're not a citizen of that country. So it's really crazy to me that anybody tries to guilt Americans into saying if you don't do this, somehow you're nativist or insensitive. Every country in the world that respects its sovereignty takes the same position we're all taking. I understand that if you're paying taxes, you say you want to have a vote. That's why you go through the process and become a citizen. We have that process available, but you've got to go through the process. We shouldn't allow anybody to raise taxes or make any kind of zoning decisions or school board decisions without being a citizen of this country. I think that, again, the quiet part was said out loud there. So I appreciate him saying it. It makes it, we might get over 80% in every state now.
And I'll just add real quick to that, that's the glory of the fact that it's a referendum. The people themselves are going to get to decide. And I think if they put it up to DC, maybe it would be a little bit of a different outcome. But in our states, we're going to give our people the opportunity, our citizens, to say whether or not non-citizens should have the right to vote in local elections. And I believe it's going to be overwhelming. I don't know what Wisconsin's going to hit 80%, but we're going to do our best to make sure we do. And it's been said before, and it'll be said again. The right to be a citizen, the right to vote, is so critical and it's so important to the fabric of who we are as Americans. It should be protected.
I would just add that it was the D.C. City Council that passed this. We don't know where the voters are in D.C. I'd like to find out. We may poll. You may see an initiative at some point. New York City, we did poll the weekend before that city council overwhelmingly passed non-citizen voting there that would allow 800,000 to 1 million non-citizens to vote. 62% of New Yorkers were opposed to it, and less than 30% were in favor of it. So it's the sort of thing where I think by and large the public clearly doesn't agree. But the concept of it is no taxation without representation. And this is really stretching that beyond all, relevance, because, we travel somewhere and we, buy a Coke, we pay taxes. We don't get to vote in that city. And it's the sort of thing where, of course, here, in some cases, I remember reading an article in Maine where a woman in Portland, Maine, they were talking about doing this. They defeated it years ago. They're still talking about putting it back on the ballot. But a woman said, I've been here for almost 20 years, and I don't get to vote. But I just don't want to give up my British citizenship. And I think we can all understand that. But that's the choice. Vote in Britain or vote here. And we call them non-citizens, but each and every one of them is a citizen of some country. So they've got to make the choice to come here. And there's one other aspect of it that sort of bugs me, which is this idea that it's just local. And I think the senators kind of knocked that out of the park, but I want to add one thing to it. In our system, the state trumps the local, and the federal trumps the state. And so if I believed that people had a right to vote, then I don't know how I could say they have that right, but only locally, so that it could be trumped by the state or by the federal government. If you have a right to vote, you have a right to vote at all levels of government. And I think it kind of shows that this argument is not really very solid.